countdown to 2021 general election is on. And I'm sure candidates are coming to you, knocking to your doors or your offices, trying to woo you so that they can ask for the mandate to lead. But this may be difficult when it comes to take a choice. And so on UG Race 2021, we bring you people who can help you understand complex scenarios, to help you cut through some of these issues so that you get to know the situation in your country, how it is, the policies of your candidates, and what really needs to be done when it comes to take a choice of the leader that you deserve. And so today, on UG Race 2021, our guest is from Chapter 4. He's a lawyer and a human rights defender, Mr. Nicholas Opiyo. Nicholas, welcome to UG Race 2021. We are moving 2021 general elections. What do you think should Ugandans be looking for in electing the leaders that can cause transformation, because transformation is what we require? I'm asking this question because money is a big issue in elections nowadays in Uganda. What should they do?
First of all, the people in this country must realize just how important an election is. That the distance between picking a ballot paper to the ballot box is the most important distance in the next 5 years, because you're deciding on the future of your district, the future of your constituency, the future of your country. The nature of the governance of the country will depend on that decision. And so people must take that decision as a very important decision. That decision can be the difference between peace and conflict. It can be the decision between proper governance and bad governance. And so everybody must take that individual franchise as a very important franchise. When the Constitution says power belongs to the people and that the people will decide how they should be governed and who should govern them, it is not an empty rhetoric, it's a very powerful rhetoric. And so people need to take this seriously. That said, people must realize as well that a packet of salt, a bar of soap, might cook you a decent meal, might wash your clothes, but will not change the future of your children, will not provide for you better education, good healthcare, good roads, and good services, period. And therefore should not be the basis for decisions in elections. In going to the ballot, voters must decide, I think, for once, to elect people who care about the public good, who are not simply seeking for a job, who are not simply seeking to better their lives, but the lives of their communities. People who have a demonstrable history and record of public service, who care about that woman in the village who is unable to find medicine, who care about that primary school teacher who is living in a mud-wattled, grass-thatched house, and yet teaching the future president, lawyers, and doctors of this country. So voters must look out for those qualities in the leaders they elect. If they do not elect leaders of those qualities, then they're going to have to live with the consequences of those decisions.
You know, every candidate will come with a flowery language, a beautiful manifesto. In fact, most of them will tell you they mean good, and when you look into the policies they want to propose, they actually mean good. How do I cut through a flowery language embedded in a politician's manifesto to know he or she's the one?
At local level elections, manifestos really do not mean much. Rather, the quality of the candidate is much more important. Character. Because people will come and woo you and say the things they think you want to hear. They will even say things they cannot deliver on. An MP will say, I will construct a road. They have no power, money, or resources to construct a road. The construction of a road is the duty of a government agency. The MP on his own cannot construct a road. So voters must understand the duties of those office bearers look for qualities in them for being able to network, being able to negotiate, being able to seek compromises from different actors in the government ecosystem for the benefit of their people. Manifestos oftentimes mean little because manifestos are empty promises that candidates have learned to make over the years. They tell you what you want to hear, but what they cannot deliver on. So I think the most important thing is character.
What you're talking about,
Character.
what you're talking about means that for us to be able to get the leaders that we deserve, we should have a vibrant citizenry. People who understand their responsibilities and their civic duties. But I wonder if really the voters understand their rights and their responsibilities, or even the role of each and every leader that they are going to vote. I've just been reading a report, a survey, I think called the Uganda Governance Pulse. Actually, voters think elections are even managed by Uganda police, by religious leaders, and things like these. Have we been prepared to understand our civic duties?
First of all, there's a voter apathy. There's an indifference, a sense of I don't care amongst voters. If you look at voter turnout over the subsequent elections we've had, it's very low and continues to go down. People don't seem to take their civic duty and responsibilities seriously. Perhaps because they think the elections are rigged and that the system is fixed, it's not fair, and therefore their vote wouldn't count. I think we have to go back to a point in which we know and believe that our vote will count. Secondly, civic education has now been replaced by voter education. Because civic education is a continuous process that doesn't have to wait for elections. The Uganda Human Rights Commission is the body mandated under our constitution to be able to carry out civic education. Civics as a subject in schools, when I went to school many years ago, we were being taught civics education. The duties of a citizen, the responsibility of a citizen, know your rights, know the law. That is now not part of the curriculum in schools. And so we do not have civic education. We scramble to do voter education towards election, but that in itself is insufficient. I think the responsibility now lies on every center of power and responsibility, from parents to teachers to cultural leaders, religious groups, to make it a point to educate people about their responsibility. And that responsibility is in fact important for the country, it's important for their lives, it's important for elections.
There seems to be an integrity deficit in our country, both among the leaders but also ordinary citizens. And in fact, there has been a survey that when money is given to a voter, that the Ugandan voter is so honest that if he receives the money, he'll actually give you the vote. Whose responsibility should it be to actually say money is not the issue, because it has now been discovered that you give, you actually take. That's how the Ugandan scenario is.
First of all, I don't agree that the vast majority of Ugandans lack integrity. What has happened in our country consistently is that people have been pushed to a point where it's about survival. People don't have a sense of fairness. And so they think the only time to interact with your leaders is during election, because if you don't take what you can take at that time, you may never see them again. So first we must reverse that situation of having responsible leaders. But secondly, and more importantly, I think we must create rules and regulation for election financing, the role of money in elections. No doubt we need money for elections, to print posters, to buy airtime on radios and TV stations, to feed those who work for you as polling agents. But there has to be a sense of limit on the use of money in election. There is no reason, morally, legally and otherwise, for a politician to travel with a huge bag of money and give it out during elections or during campaigns to people and ask them to vote for him because he's given them money. We must criminalize that behavior. Secondly, we have a situation in this country in which the court might even nullify your election on the basis that you are involved in voter bribery. But in the subsequent by-election, you are actually allowed to contest, even when you're found to have been involved in bribery. There is no prosecution, criminal prosecution that follows the findings of the court of bribery, of criminal activity, and there is no bar from that person going back to that same election that he has just been found to have bribed or stolen. So we must make it risky to be involved in acts of bribery and corruption during election.
And lastly, I hear people in the opposition group saying the ground is not leveled, we are not going to have elections that are free and fair. But I believe no one is going to level the ground for anyone. If you are to give advice, considering the status, how things are, how can they go about a ground they claim is unleveled, but also dream of having victory?
There is no election in the world in which all candidates have parity of resources, parity of space, and parity in every sense of the election. Elections, people bring different strengths and advantages. Some are systemic, some are financial, and some are cultural. And so elections are never a game of parity and equality of arms. And so let's first admit that's not going to be possible, because you're contesting against somebody who is serving in the office. Even in established democracies of over 3,000 years like the US, the American president still flies Air Force One to go for a campaign rally. The American president still uses the Secret Service during elections. And so elections cannot be one in which everybody is equal. Let's admit that fact. Secondly, let's believe that the people of this country have the ability, the knowledge to decipher what is good and what is bad for them. The political opposition must first of all define their messages, beyond the bickering that we have. They must define their messages and sell that message to Ugandans. What is the different vision of Uganda that they are selling? Because they must drive people to reimagine this country beyond the current establishment. I don't see them driving people to reimagine the country. A coherent economic policy, what you will do for the country. A coherent foreign policy, what you will do for this country. So let's first hone the message and have a sense of identity and distinguish ourselves from what we have. If you don't do that, people don't see a difference. We must begin to inspire Ugandans to believe in a future beyond President Yoweri Museveni.
Talking about inspiring, I've just remembered that majority of the Ugandan population are young people. And so this election is going to be decided by young people. They will determine where we go. And of course, women. How do you think they should be emboldened to be able to have their voice heard, but actually also get involved actively into leadership positions and not just like people who can be used as a pawn in the political game by those who are slightly older?
The women and the youth are a majority with a minority mindset. They think about co-option. They think about the tokenism of politics. As long as we create a district seat for a woman MP, then the women have been served. If we create a seat for a youth MP, then the youth have been served. First, we must begin to define what is the women agenda. What is the youth agenda? What do the youth want? Because if you don't know what you want, you can actually fall for anything. What do the women want? If you don't know what you want, you can fall for anything. We must define what the women and youth agenda in this country is and begin to mobilize the young people around that agenda. And that agenda is not an agenda of co-option. Because if you look at Uganda's leadership, the top leadership comprises of the 1% of the population. Okay? The people of the 1930s and 40 generation are the ones in charge of this country, leadership, at the top end. in a country in which 78% of the population is below the age of 35, that seems to me to be ironic. And so I think that we must begin to define a future beyond the generation in power and carry forward the young people to be able to define what they want for themselves. But two, and perhaps more importantly, that we must begin to ask for active participation of women and young people in the affairs of the different political formations. Because if you look at other political parties, it may not be as different from the party in power. That the women and the youth, who are the majority, are not well represented in decision making, not office, in decision making processes, because that's where direction is drawn, in decision making processes, but also in execution of those decisions. So we have to begin to provide for spaces in the political position, in the ruling party, for young people participation. We must accept to turn the page, one way or the other, across the board.
Okay. In conclusion, I'd want you to look into the face of those Ugandans and maybe give that wise counsel in about 10-20 seconds as they march to the election in 2021 from Nicholas Opiyo.
The 2021 election is a watershed moment for this country, especially for the young people. It will determine whether this country will move towards a path of peaceful transfer of power or through a path of peace, long-term peace for this country. So to all of you young people out there, the women out there, go and vote. Go and get your national ID. Vote. Regardless of who you vote for in power, which color you belong to, go and vote. Take part in the election. Stop whining, stop complaining, act. Take a side. Don't be neutral. Because if you're neutral, then you're abdicating your role as an active citizen. Go and vote. Please vote.
All right. You've heard him there, Nicholas Opiyo from Chapter 4, ending with wise counsel to you that you need to go and exercise your civic responsibility and vote, because this is likely to be, like you said, a watershed moment for Uganda. And you, the young people of Uganda, you have so much to do in this election. You have the numbers, you have the guts, you have the power. If you can use that, maybe we can move this country from one position to another better position. From UGRS 2021, we wish you all the best in this election of 2021.